Hey guys, most of you might have seen my initial review about the N Pro 2. Well, today we'll revisit this keyboard after about 4 months of use and answer some of the questions that I wasn't able to answer in the first video. And to make things a bit more exciting, I have another N Pro 2 on hand, this time with kale white switches. I had never heard about these switches before checking out this keyboard, so that should be interesting. This unit was provided by Banggood, so as always, I'll have a link down below if you want to check it out. So, let's check it out. So the included accessories haven't changed on this one. You get extra colorful PBT keycaps, a keycap puller, and a USB Type-C cable. Banggood also included this Bluetooth USB dongle, and that's great as the N Pro doesn't come with one in the box. If you're new to this keyboard, what makes it so interesting is that it's mechanical, it has pretty good PBT double shot keycaps, it has highly customizable RGB LEDs with animations and key-by-key color illumination. The layout is fully customizable too, and you can also remap 2 layers of keys accessible with the function keys, and all the settings are saved on board so that you can keep them across devices. It also works wireless over Bluetooth, and it's quite a reliable Bluetooth chipset, so it can work with desktop PCs and laptops, but also with phones and tablets. And finally, it has a USB Type-C connector, which has its benefits over micro USB or mini USB. It has a bunch of other nice features, but that's the main ones, and this keyboard can be found for around $80 depending on the configuration and sales, making it quite affordable compared to other 60% keyboards with similar features. One thing that has changed is that the newer N Pros like this one with kale white switches come with 2nd gen box switches, and the main difference is that the original ones were slightly too big and there was a risk of cracking your keycaps' stems when swapping them. Luckily, it never happened with my first N Pro 2, although I've replaced the keycaps multiple times. But the thing that might have helped is that I only have PBT keycaps, and this material is slightly softer than ABS, so it's less prone to cracking. These stems are definitely smaller as keycaps are a lot easier to remove with these new box switches. As you can see, these are white box switches. And they have a really special feel. They would be described as clicky linear, which may sound impossible, but they're basically a linear switch with an added click bar. This adds a slight audible click and a slight tactile feel too. It's not responsible for the actuation of the switch though, it's just there for the feel and sound. It's a really unique switch and the feel is something different. The best way I could describe the click, both in sound and feel, is a high quality mouse click with added travel before and after the click. It's sharp and precise, more than your typical blue switch, and far more enjoyable, I think. I like that they're not too loud, so people around you won't complain too much, and they're also super smooth without completely ditching out the tactile bump. I think I still prefer browns in general, but these are really interesting too, and I would prefer them over blues or reds for coding and web browsing. Their actuation force is 50 grams, so they're quite light too, being really easy to trigger, and bottoming them out would require 60 grams. But enough talking about these, let's hear how they sound. Now, how's that keyboard 4 months later? I generally like it a lot. My first N Pro 2 has been used every day at work since I've had it, and I've used it mostly wirelessly. With the built-in battery, I was getting a little under 80 hours of usage, so just under 2 weeks, and that's only when I didn't forget to turn it off at the end of the day. When you leave it on with your PC sleeping, it seems like the battery drains faster as it tries to connect to a nearby device. However, I modded mine quite heavily and replaced the battery for a 3000 mAh one, which is almost double the capacity, and with this one, I'm getting a little over 3 weeks of use. At that point, it's definitely worth using it wireless, and it doesn't feel like it's going to die on you anytime soon. This keyboard also has cool software features like the tap function, which lets you use the bottom right keys as arrow keys when you only tap them. But I personally disabled that function as I was already used to function and WASD for arrow keys, and there was time where I hit the right shift key by mistake shortly and it registered an arrow up key, so although it can be really useful, there was no real benefit to me. Other than that, I kept the layout as is. I added a few custom light themes, although I only use them when plugged in to prevent draining the battery too fast. I also changed the keycaps a few times around. Again, if you own the AND Pro with the original box switches, I'd recommend you stick to PBT keycaps to prevent potential stem cracks. The AND Pro 2 has a standard NC layout, so most third-party keycap sets will fit without issues. As for custom cases, it's doable, but the screw pattern doesn't match the GH60 standard, so only 2 of the screws fit. The location of the Type-C connector and the thickness of the battery are also potential issues, both of which I addressed in a previous video that I invite you to check if you're planning on modding your AND Pro 2. Other than that, it's still an amazing value in 2019. The Ducky One Mini is a great contender to this one, and I already placed my pre-order on Banggood. Hopefully it will get shipped soon. It has pretty much the same features, apart that it doesn't have Bluetooth, and it has regular Cherry MX switches. Also, I feel like it won't be reprogrammable, which could be a pretty major downside for me, as the built-in function layer has the arrow keys not where I'd like them to be, but we'll have to wait and see. Other options would be the Geek GK61 for $50. This one looks really interesting for the price, although it doesn't seem to have PBT keycaps and it doesn't support Bluetooth. It does have a USB Type-C port, which is nice to see for the price, and it looks like you can change the layout with up to 3 layers of keys. It also uses hot swappable Gateron optical switches, so you could probably replace them for other compatible optical switches down the road. And finally, for $50 as well, the Mantistek GK3-61, which is also a pretty cheap and decent alternative to the AND Pro 2. You do lose the Type-C port, the PBT keycaps in exchange for ABS ones, and the key remapping of the base layer and function layers, but it still supports Bluetooth and has RGB LEDs though. Again, apart from this last Mantistek board, I haven't tried the other keyboards mentioned, so don't take my words for it, they might have flaws that I don't know of yet. Now, I'll try to address some of the information that was missing in my original review. First, there are no official third-party cases for this keyboard up to now. As I mentioned earlier, there are ways to make it work, but don't expect these to fit right away. If you do plan to change the case though, the battery thickness might be an issue, so some wondered if you could simply remove it, and you can. The keyboard will still work in wired mode that way. Then, the switches are soldered in, so they can't easily be replaced with other switches unless you desolder the whole thing. So unless you're really good with a soldering iron, I wouldn't recommend you to try it. A great news though is that the Obenslav software used to set the LEDs, the macros, and the layout is now available on Linux as a Debian package, so it would work on Ubuntu as an example. At launch, it was only available on Windows and Mac. They also added a few features like a battery life indicator with function 2 plus F8 and a racing wheel mode with function 2 plus F5. I tried to make that racing wheel one work while the feature was in beta, and it didn't work for me, but maybe now it works well in some racing games. They also added media controls, which weren't included at first. Also, the LEDs might seem to flicker on camera, but they don't in real life, so don't worry. Then, if you want to use the keyboard wired with one of your computer's USB Type-C port, you will need to buy a Type-C to Type-C cable, as the one included has a Type-A connector at the end. If you want to switch between the wired connection and the Bluetooth device, you will have to use the physical on-off switch under the keyboard to go into Bluetooth mode. The transition is instant as it will stay connected to the Bluetooth device even when turned off, but it's not as practical as switching between Bluetooth devices. As for latency, there can be some over Bluetooth. Generally, it's fine for typing though. At work, it varies from time to time. When my computer is under load, it feels like there's a little lag, but at other times, the latency is almost unperceivable. Connecting the board for the first time is a hit or miss depending on the device you want to use it with. With my Windows 10 PC with the built-in Bluetooth chip of my motherboard, it tends to take a few tries to make it connect successfully for the first time. However, with my phone, it works pretty much flawlessly. And if you want to use it for gaming, I'd still recommend to use it wired as it's always perfectly reliable and no latency is ever introduced. Some also asked about PS4 compatibility, and I don't have a PS4 on hands, and I wasn't able to find the info online either. Only a few people on Reddit who seem to imply that it didn't work, so if your main goal is to use the AND Pro 2 with the PS4, I'd probably look for another keyboard that's known to work with that console. As for choosing between Gaterons and Kales, it's really more of a personal choice. I prefer the Kale browns over the Gateron browns, but I haven't compared all the colors against each other. The really big difference is the Kale white switches, I think, where you don't get the same feel with Gaterons, but with the other switch colors, it will be similar and you might like one more than the other, but there's no definitive clear winner. Also, I have seen some users getting defective AND Pros. These are generally issues that are there from day one, so it's not the end of the world as you can still return it directly. As for the 2 units I've received, I bought one from FlashQuark and the other came from Banggood. Both are defect free, although the last one is quite loose on the Type-C connector, but I checked and it seems like it's the cable as the port is well soldered on the PCB. There were also rumors about an ISO layout version coming someday. It's been talked about a while back before the launch of the AND Pro 2, but now that it has launched only in the most common NC layout, Obbins have not made any statement regarding that, so I bet it's not coming soon for now. Finally, here's a sound comparison between my heavily modded AND Pro 2 with the original Kale Box browns and the newer AND Pro 2 with the 2nd gen Kale Box white switches. So that pretty much wraps it up. Hope it gave you an idea on what the Kale white switches were like and that it answered the remaining questions you had about this keyboard. Feel free to let me know which other 60% keyboard you'd like me to review. Apart from the Ducky One 2 Mini, this one is already pre-ordered, so it's only a matter of time until I can get my hands on it. I'll have links to the AND Pro 2 and to the other 60% boards I've talked about down in the description in case you want to check them out. So as always, thank you for watching. Make sure you like the video if you did, and if you didn't, just let me know why down below. Otherwise, don't forget to subscribe if you still haven't already, as I'll see you in the next video.